Hello and welcome to Optional Rule. My name is Scott. I'm the host of this weekly show. I talk about all things D&D, gaming, tabletop role-playing related, and generally anything about the hobby and how to make games more fun in play or at the table. So thank you for joining me today. I hope you'll enjoy today's show. I'm going to talk a little bit about creating a pitch deck for your game. I need to hide my own camera because I always get distracted looking at myself. So pitch decks are a great way to sort of set expectations about games, to recruit players to your games. There's a couple of other things that it can do for you, and I'll talk about that today. I mean, what are the role of a pitch deck in your D&D game is very important because it's a pre-session zero element to set expectations of why you're even getting together for session zero. This is my pitch deck that I did for my Rime of the Frost Maiden campaign that I just ended and I began last year when the module came out. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, what goes into it, what benefit it has, what it does and does not do, and some other things like that. I'm going to create one for my upcoming Tales of the Sword Mountains scenarios, which are sort of one shots, and I'll compare and contrast that this is going to be a very different genre game than Rime of the Frost Maiden. How to tease that out. A lot of the most of this is the text from my previous game, so I'm going to take a lot of this out, change some of it. Talk about how you can use this in your own games, and sort of again what the role of that is for. So first of all, if you're new here, thank you very much for joining me. My name is Scott. I host a small blog online called Optional Rule, so you can find that at optionalrule.com. I'll go over the latest post today. This is my latest post from this week. If you're viewing this in the future, I greet you from the past. There'll be some other blog posts here, but I post house rules, whatever I'm noodling that week, analysis. Sometimes it's on, sometimes it's off, but it's just that sort of fun bit of what am I thinking about when it comes to gaming that week? What could you think about? What is hopefully enjoyable for you? So I hope you'll participate in the conversation, whether that's left or right for you. Go ahead and drop a hello or a comment or anything that you hear as part of this that you think is interesting. Go ahead and drop that into the chat. Talk a little bit about what oh boy, I've got a Twitch guy, I got a ban, and just sort of participate in the conversation, and I hope you'll enjoy it. I've got several conversational channels going on here. I started a Discord a couple weeks ago. Look out on my Twitch or on my Twitter for some. So I'm trying to get my dashboard, and I've got a spammer in the stream. I should have loaded this up beforehand. Dude, let's ban that person. Oh gosh. Ban. All right. So that's gone now. All right. So yeah, I'm active on Twitter. I put stuff up on Instagram, just lots of different things. But check out the blog at optionalrule.com. It has lots of my thoughts and things that are going on here. This week, I published part 1 of Perilous Journeys. It's a journey set of rules that'll relate to the pitch deck that I'm creating today. But you don't need to read the small text to know it's small. But basically, what it takes is long rests are no longer possible on the road. What that does is if you think about any adventure, any set of encounters in a D&D game, they're always this node, right? You go into a dungeon, you move from one node to the next to move from room to room to room. You're not taking short rests or long rests between every room, but that's essentially what you get in the wilderness. So this is taking wilderness adventures or travel and sort of grouping them together as one set of encounters, right, that you expend resources over. That's really all it is. So it's you can't take a long rest on the road. You just, all you do is you can take short rest and move on from there. There's a couple of provisions though. Obviously, when you get to a dungeon, you're probably going to want to have a place to take a long rest, or you get set up at some location. So you can only take long rests in Haven. So some mansion or a comfortable above inn room in town, or you've talked to some local farmer, you can stay in some kind of comfortable setting there. Then you can take a long rest. But without this, you really you can't. So it changed adventures on the road together, encounters on the road together for single cohesive adventure, which is a little bit more fun. However, you still want to be able to take those long rests. So there's rules in here for what's setting up what's called base camps, which is you can use the DC 15 wisdom save, not wisdom save, wisdom survival check, set up a permanent camp, takes a full day to do it. So you can't just throw up one in an hour. But once you have one up, you can take your long rest there. So you can get to a dungeon, or if you get really hammered on the road, you can choose to basically take a day to rest, right? If you make the roll and you have the supplies. And then there's some provisional rules, like you can't take a long rest on the road. But if you do sleep for 8 hours peacefully, someone might be able to do something like medical care, make a medical check on you, or a hearty meal, and you can recover like 1 hit die to spend that during a short rest or at the end of your 8 hours of sleep. So it provides you some contingencies to go through it. This is not a harsh or gritty rule set. It's not intended to be that. It's just intended to group sets of encounters together more logically, and group the encounters you run into on a road or during travel in the same kind of logical way that you might group them room to room in a dungeon. So think of travel encounters as individual rooms in a dungeon, as opposed to sort of these isolated, I get a long rest and alpha strike during every encounter on the road. Now I want to point out there's nothing wrong with that. Every rule, what I love about sort of house rules in D&D is it pushes towards what kind of rules are you trying to create? What kind of adventures are you trying to create? So for me, I'm going to go into a set of adventures that are sort of wilderness-based frontier adventures, right? So I want to lean into that frontier ethos where encounters in the wilderness are part of the greater sort of dungeon bashing, and it's not all just sort of reset after every encounter in the wilderness. So I also travel pacing becomes a little different. There's some DCs. So really, I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of this other than to say it's up. I think it's useful. I'm really excited about these rules to apply them to the next game. And then since pacing differs, right? How you can use wagons, what mounts, how much mounts affect things. I'm gonna since pacing affects how long you're in the wilderness, since you can't take a rest, it actually becomes relevant now, how fast or slow you're moving through the wilderness and how you do or don't plan around that. So that's it speaks to the breadth of encounters in D&D. I personally, I can't get around as a DM, and even as a player, right? I kind of like roll my eyes a little bit when things get just too hand wavy in the wilderness. Now, that's not because it's better or worse. It's just really because of my background. I'm a veteran. I spent a good amount of time in the Army, and I've spent a lot of time in the field, and it just comes off as super weird to me. It's just saying physics don't apply when you don't feel like it. It's just weird. So to me, I enjoy games with a little bit, not too much. I don't necessarily like a harsh edge, but I like a game where there's a little bit of work to do in the wilderness, and it extends the adventure into the wilderness too. So this is what those rules are for. I will post a part 2 next week. That's going to feature what they call travel actions. So people if you joined last week's stream, you probably saw some of them. Travel actions are basically things like foraging. I'll talk about how I want to change those in a second. And I'm going to not put up Notion SO. I'll put up Notion. You've seen this if you joined last time, but Traveler's Rest. So here we go. Yeah, all this didn't make it in, and some of the things I dropped, there was a bunch of like contingency rules for resting I didn't need. I just sort of dropped those together. So so here's party roles during. So I'm changing it from roles to action because I want to give people some options. So there's you can take the scouting action, which means you're out in front of the party. You have to determine how far, but you do things like ability. You can share your perception check, or you get a save basically. You get a perception check before you run into any danger, or can avoid encounters to get close to it. A warder, which is basically an action you can take where you're protecting people in the party itself. So you get a save against anybody coming up behind you, and you can do things like share. I'm trying to figure out what the actual role is, but like share your initiative check or share your perception check during an ambush with up to a member of your party equal to your proficiency bonus, let's say. A steward would do things like be able to forage, and I'll get into that in a second. they would get saves for the party gear essentially and set up camps. Like they can save, run an automatic save to keep the camp from being disrupted. A guide does things like how much mileage you can cover in a day, how dangerous or not dangerous the terrain is ahead of you, and things like that. So that'll be part two. Now, other actions will be foraging. I'll talk a little bit about rations here quickly. So I do want to. Rations are an interesting thing. People seem to really be upset. They don't like rations. They don't cover it, and I get it. I think rations are a little stupid in 5e. If you look at the starvation rules, there's almost no reason to worry about rations, right? Anybody can try to forage on an individual day, get a bunch of supplies, and find pounds of food. And the way starvation rules work, no one ever really starves to death. Even maybe in a desert, if you have a 0 bonus, but for the most part, there's no actual effect from the starvation rule. So I just think counting rations, counting things like that. I think it's a good idea to just not do that. I have to check on my cat. Give me 1 second, everybody. I'll be right back. I think that's my pause. Yep, pause. Be right back. I'll be right back. Oh, sorry. That's compelling. Sorry about that, everybody. Yeah, everything's good. Where was I going with this? So rations, I'm going to change the idea of foraging that. So if you look at the Perilous Journey rules, there's a rule here where with a hearty meal, you can get you can get a hit dice returned, right? So you're in the wilderness. You're not taking long rests, so you're not recovering hit dice. You're spending them to heal, and so there's a small mechanic where you can gain 1 hit dice if you have fresh ingredients. Like rations don't do it, good berries don't do it. Just standard like conjured food doesn't do it. You have to get like fresh game or fresh ingredients in the wilderness. So instead of like day-to-day tracking, I'm going to focus, foraging is really focused on, can you get the materials you need to create a good and hearty meal? So it's only when you want to get hit points or hit dice for the party or do something extra that you need to worry about it. And I think that's a better mechanic, like not have to worry about the day-to-day survival, since it really doesn't matter. The rules as written, and I don't think they need to be written. Rewritten. That's just what we want to do. So that's going to be part of that second part that I'm going to publish next week. There's some other things I put up about, do you change healing? And I'm not going to create a gritty rule set here. This is just to create a continuous set of adventures in the wilderness to make it part of play, with some rules that you can sort of get some enhancements or manage that and interact with gameplay in some meaningful way. But that's all I'm going to do. All right. So yeah, go ahead and check them out. I hope you'll leave a comment, especially if you see anything worth talking about. Go ahead and drop down in Twitter, add a comment here if you have anything like that. But I'd like to hear your feedback in this. What do you think they'll be useful? So let's talk about pitch decks. So a pitch deck. A pitch deck is in the startup space or the entrepreneur space. A pitch deck is a way to sell somebody on your idea. So the idea of a pitch deck is you have somebody that you want to get involved into what you're doing. So in this case, it's a game. You have somebody you might want to play in your game, right? You need to recruit those players, but they need to know what you're recruiting them for, because play styles differ so much, right? So what a pitch deck does is it gets them excited about your idea. It summarizes it in a way that is evocative for that person, so they understand, okay, this is what I'll be doing. This is what you're asking me for, how much investment of time or resources or energy, what kind of rules we're going to play with, all the different things. So really to get them on board either on board to want to play this game or or not, like realize that that's not the game for them, and to shape some expectations before going into the game itself, so that you understand that you're all playing the same game. That one of the like the rule -1 is play the same game, right? Like session 0 gets you sets boundaries and expectations, but there's a step prior to session 0 where you need to understand what is it we're getting together to play. What are the basic assumptions of the kind of game I was recruited to. And session 0 is really about refining that and setting boundaries so that you can play meaningfully together, do something important. So there's this pre-step that's needed. Now, if you have a regular party, you've been gaming with the same group for 20 years, you probably don't need to do this. You're probably good. Although, if you want to change genres of a game, the way I run games is I shoot for a different feel for different campaigns. So if you're looking at this pitch deck for my last campaign, it's very horror-centric, survival-centric, harsh reality, kind of a gritty even rule set. So the tagline was, and this is right out of the module, right? Fantasy, horror, paranoia, isolation, and secret. So I just used that as the tagline. A great thing for a pitch, whenever you do a pitch, is they call it an elevator pitch. So in 30 seconds, tell people what you're looking for. Now, I'm about to go through 6 slides, so we'll say 30 seconds for each or something like that. But it should be something you can quickly do. And then this should be a guide when you get to session 0 about what you're doing there, right? So there's different roles that the different slides play, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what each one of those are. So the pitch itself is got, I think, 5 main elements, right? So you want to give them some evocative statement of what the pitch is for. So here it's fantasy, horror, paranoia, isolation, and secrets. You want to talk about the setting. You want to talk about the system. Like, I assume it's D&D 5e, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's 4e. Maybe it's OSR. Like, is there some play, some mix of new rules in the system you're using? What sources you might be using for that campaign, what inspiration, so media inspiration and things like that. So here you see the Icewind Dale setting, The Thing, In the Mountains of Madness, 30 Days of Night, The Fog, Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, Elric of Melniboné, Deadwood. So I mixed in a lot of movie references, book references, old school references, new. And one of the things I like is in the United States anyway, we have a movie rating system that's pretty easily understandable. So I just rated it PG-13 in general with occasional R for horror elements. So I probably should have put language to them, but I can throw out a little F-bomb now and again. But that tells people what the inspiration is and what the general target level of the maturity of the game is, and so I think it's very important. And then campaign style, right? So this is moderate to heavy RP, moderate lore, heavy action adventure, heavy combat, or moderate combat focus, heavy focus on player choices and consequences. Funny at times, but not goofy. I like to use that a lot. I like humor. I like humor quite a bit, but I'm not really a big anime humor guy, right? So the humor can come in lots of forms. Sometimes it's, absurd humor. Sometimes it's quips. Sometimes it's wit. Sometimes there's lots of different things. Strange characters. They're all game. There's nothing wrong. There's no inferior way to laugh or play a game. But you do want to understand, again, you want to play the same genre of game. That's a big role of the Dungeon Master, to provide everybody the sort of the central hub to understand that they're playing the same game together. So you're not just like playing wildly different genres. Sometimes different genres fit. So it's not a hard rule, right? You want to vet things a little bit to keep things flowing and make sure that the players are getting along well with one another. But if one person shows up to play like a backstabbing player versus player game, and another person is showing up to play like a unified heroic game, those two people are just not going to get along, and the game is going to suffer because of it. So this pitch deck can help shape those expectations so they come in with that character idea that is going to fit well. So setting, system, sources, inspiration, and campaign style. I'm going to go quick with whatever time I have left after I explain this to talk about, to create that for my Sword Mountain game. This is my last campaign. So tools and resources, if you're going to use tools and resources for the game. Now, obviously, this is super important for an online game. or are you using a virtual tabletop? Are you asking people to be on camera? Are you asking them to be, to use voice or text or however? But it actually also applies at the table. If you're getting together in person, are you asking everybody to be in a Discord server so they can communicate on their phones? Are you asking people to use D&D Beyond for their character sheet, or not to use D&D Beyond, or not to use dice rollers? Or, I mean, really look at what you want out of this and put those tools and resources that those players need. If you want pen and paper only, having a single slide with pen and paper only, that's it. Is a great slide because it tells people what you're shooting for and sort of what material support they're going to have. Maybe you want to put snacks in here. I don't know. That could be. I think that's for a later slide. But anyway, it's super important, just so people understand what they're going to be using at the table. And that's also, let me say why this becomes important, because for an underappreciated reason, especially if you play with a number of different players. Sometimes people have a need for something that you don't realize. Like maybe maybe just, dude, I have to use my calculator. I just can't do these. I get too anxious when I have to do math in front of people, or I need something with hearing support, or I need to be able to look things up, or I need something. There are people who might have perceptive challenges, or they might have some other challenge that they need some tool at the table. And this is a good place to put it in if you as a DM need it. But when you get to session 0, or when you talk to players or present them about the slide, it presents them with an opportunity to say, hey, I see you say pen and paper only, but I need to do X, Y, or Z. It gives them an opportunity to open up this topic of understand what your expectations are and add a suggestion, a recommendation, or talk about what their needs are in a meaningful way. So this, again, maybe I should mention then what this is. This is a starting point for a conversation. This is not a laying down the law as a DM. This is not this is not just controlling other people, telling what they're going to do, all this stuff. This is a starting point. Say, listen, I'm the DM and this is the kind of game I run. I hope you're interested in it, but this is what I have in mind right now. And they come back into an iterative conversation. Now maybe there's some things you don't give on. Maybe some things are hard limits for you, and that's perfectly fine to have. But it's good to understand what those are. It's good for the players to understand what those are. And it's really good to receive from feedback from potential players about, hey, can we do this instead? I see you want to do horror here, but I can't deal with body horror. Can we not do that? Like that's those are important information. And you can decide if that's a deal breaker for you. Everybody can decide if it's a deal breaker for them to move forward. So tools are a great way to do that too. And I like to improve these are just Google Slides. I like to include little images that are sort of evocative of the type of campaign that we're going to be running, to sort of give them so you'll see all these images are sort of bleak or fantastic or isolated or horrific or dark. And so this is a good color palettes, and images are a great way to sort of set a mood for a game. Right, the next one is running style and convention. Now, quickly, I go over the slides here. There's a couple of different things where I like to divide things in my mind. So running style conventions, homebrew elements, table rules, and then basic safety and consent. I'm going to talk about why I separated those into different categories. So to me, running style and conventions they're not rules. They're not house rules. You're not going to be rolling dice for most of this. It's just really what's the unofficial style of the game? What's the mood? What's the flow? What's the way that people interact? What's the important elements here for how does the table? What are the styles of the game? Like, it's a style guide, right? You can write. If you write code, there's always a style guide related to code, because you can write code in all kinds of different ways, none of which are invalid. It's just you want to have people doing something similar, right? So you write a style guide to know what the format of communicating is, what type of action they're looking for, how you call things out. So I have things like fast turns in combat. I want to keep things fast. So it's my way of asking people, don't know your spells and abilities and announce your DC. So when you roll, say I cast such and such spell, it's a dex save DC 15. So I know as a game master, and this is one thing I have a hard time with players, and it actually is starting to drive me bananas, where I've asked for the 100th time, what is the save and what stat is the save for and what is the value every time they cast a spell. So this is an evergreen topic. People talk about it all the time on YouTube, all the time online. But for some reason, players just keep doing it. And it is rude. It's just straight up rude. Where they're playing a caster, they have some special ability. We go around the entire initiative order. It gets to them, and they hadn't. It's like the first time they thought I have an action coming up, and now they start. Oh, okay, and then they start reading their character sheet, and they wonder what things are. It just bogs play down. It makes it just unfun, and people focus on a bunch of things that just aren't going to, if they blame initiative, they blame the game master, they blame all kinds of things. In my experience, 90% of the slowdown of combat is people just not knowing their ability, not making a decision, not telling you all the information you need to do something quickly. So that's what this is really around. So I'm asking the players, can we please keep this quick, right? No one wants to wait 20 minutes for a round to get back around to them. I use average NPC damage to keep things moving, so I'm doing things to keep it moving. Consider rolling to hit and damage at the same time. Now, not everybody wants to do that, and that's okay, but if you can, you roll your D20 and your weapon damage at the same time. So if you hit, you know what the weapon damage is. You can even roll advantage or disadvantage right out of the bat, so you know what they are. So virtual tabletops do that. It's an easy way to just keep the game flowing, and so that's a style and convention I ask people to do. PvP is not encouraged. I want people to role play out. Why are they in conflict? I don't want players like stealing stuff from people in the middle of the night, causing hard feelings. Nothing is absolute, right? So if we have a group that can do that well, I might be okay for it. But just without people knowing each other, it's a good rule to have. And let me also talk about where this is oriented. I don't have a regular play group. I have moved, I don't know how many times. I've probably lived in 10 different states, between countries and states that I've lived in, probably 10. Now I've lived a few years in the Richmond, Virginia area, which is where I am right now. But I still don't have a play group. It gets harder as you get older because everyone's young. And that's not necessarily a problem. It's just, it's just harder. It's harder to meet people as you get older. And I would like a peer group, but they're harder to find. So anyway, the situation I'm in frequently is I'm encountering new players all the time who don't know my style. I don't know theirs. I need to set some expectations. So play PvP with a group of people who don't know each other. I've never seen it work. If you can make work, God bless you. But I'd never seen that work well for a game. Dark moments may be introduced for the heroes to shine. Just these, think through the expectation mismatches you've had in your game. Put in any games you run in the past, put a bullet about that to mitigate for it in running style. So those are cases where people think I'm picking on them if a bad guy does something. No, I'm giving you a chance to be heroic. Killing someone over disagreement is not common in the world. No murder hoboing. I'm trying to tell them I'm not a murder hobo game. All those kinds of things. I'm not going to go bullet by bullet, but this is sort of the what running style and conventions is for. Why do I use rules? How much do I use rules? Encourage use of downtime. How are we going to do how often we play, how long we play at an individual time. Those are kind of, important things. Then I separate running conventions from homebrew elements. So these are rules. This is for rules in the game system. And you'll see I broke out table rules momentarily in a second. It's not always hard and fast, but I broke these out because what homebrew elements are what game rules, rules to your characters, roles that they're going to have to make, are we using that are changed from the book. So wizards can scribe and prepares cantrips at first level. That actually, that rule is no longer valid because Tasha's came up with a rule that's a little bit better. Barbarians' intimidating presence can use strength or charisma, just different things like that. Just put them here. If you're not using a feat, if you're limiting races, just homebrew elements, put them there. So table rules are rules that are they're a little bit more than just conventions. They're like ways that we game system elements that aren't like role oriented. So, interesting conflict is fine, but please no evil characters or agents of chaos. Roll one per outcome, no chain roll. So if you're telling people like it's still a rule element, but it's not a codified rule in that you're telling people what DC they need. So what that means specifically is, a player will go to a door, they check to see if it's locked, they roll and they fail, and the next player behind them goes, well, I checked too, and they roll, and this chain of people waiting to see if the person before them failed, and you get like 5 quadruple advantage is the equivalent of roll you get. We don't do that. When you come across something, it's just somebody rolls once. If somebody wants to help them, then that's great. They can go ahead and do it, and they can get advantage on the roll. But you can't just do this sort of drawn out chain of wait for you to fail and suspect something's there because of the dice roll, right? Set your stakes and your actions up front. Push actions by setting the stakes. There's a whole blog post on that. Please be courteous. Let other players talk. Share the spotlight. Blah blah blah. Just different things that aren't rules, but are really boundaries and sort of rules about how you interact. So it's more than style. It's less than a house. It's less than a house element. That's what that is. Then we go over to baseline and safety rules. This is hugely important. People talk about this all the time. I'm always surprised that there's people who will swear by it slavishly, and there's people who will say we should never do it. It causes bad. And I don't get that. I don't get the never do it. The simple fact of this is it's just setting expectations so that people understand what it is that's acceptable, setting boundaries. I made a tweet just a few moments before the show started because I was thinking about this slide. One of the great ironies about baseline safety and consent is that there's two really. One is that people often, not everybody, but there's a small subgroup of people in the gaming space who approach baseline safety and consent as if it's something they police other people on. Like this is what they're telling other people they have to do. And they don't take it as, okay, these are the boundaries I need to respect, which is what it is. And that tells you a lot about somebody when they externalize blame, when they externalize responsibility. That's often a red flag for players at any table. GMs are players too, right? So it's an interesting element. So one, I think of it as a boundary you're being asked to respect and check yourself on. And then if somebody else isn't doing, you're doing, of course you want to say something, but generally speaking, that's a good thing. And then the other thing is people, I've been shocked by this since we've used formalized safety tools. I'm trying to think. I've over half the games I've run, and maybe even played some cases. Over half the games I've run, I go through what I feel like is nice, clear. Hey, Faye Liar 04, can I share? They're saying, can I share some homebrew content with you? Absolutely, please do. I love it. You can either drop it here or you can drop it in Twitter, whatever is your. But please do. So where is that? So baseline safety and consent. Over half the games I've run, I've gone through like this, made clear what we're doing, where the boundaries are, and I have like in session 1. Had people just violate them at like absolutely right out of the gate. I've just been shocked at people violating those. It's just really shocked me. And those are almost always the people who view baseline safety tools as something to police somebody else on, almost always. And I've just been absolutely shocked by people who just absolutely unaware. And often they're the biggest proponents of safety tools, which is also just, there's something weird in the space there. And what this should be is a way to set boundaries, understand how to respect boundaries, and just shape a conversation over what's healthy for you or not healthy for you. But people just are so weird about this on every side of it. Faye Liar 04, detect spiritual willingness, divination, cantrip, cast one time, blah, blah, blah. So there's somebody who's sharing a cantrip with me. Verbal somatic component. You touch a humanoid corpse and ask the soul that occupied it in life if they consent to you resurrecting or reanimating them. The soul must answer truthfully, although is able to give a justification for their answer if they desire. Yeah, cool. I like it. I mean, that gets into safety and consent, right? I'm trying to think of what would I do? Like, first of all, I don't even recall the last time someone cast Raise Dead in my game. Like, I don't often get that high. I like tier 1 and tier 2. But I'm trying to think. I like it. So, in other words, awesome. You should do that in your game. I think it'd be. Would I use it in mine? Do I think it's necessary? I probably would. Speak with Dead would probably do that. Like, because if they're not going to bother to cast a spell, it doesn't matter if it exists or not. But I think to speak with Dead, one, and two, I assume that you must be willing to come back. So someone can cast this. So actually, so let me ask you, Phalar. It's intended for good aligned necromancers. Okay. So let me ask you two questions because I'd love to hear your feedback on it. What's the role of Speak with Dead in this? Like, would you get more information? Like with Speak with Dead, because you can even cast, as a necromancer especially, you can even ask somebody, hey, do you mind if I use your body as a zombie guardian? I can't imagine them saying yes, but you can at least ask them, right? And then the other one is, do you allow people to get resurrected if they're not willing, if the soul isn't willing? There's no right or wrong answer there, by the way, because there's a great plot line out of the old show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where she was brought back to life and she didn't want to be. They thought they were doing her solid, and she comes back and she's like, no, I was in heaven. I was happy, and you brought me back to this terrible place, and now I'm depressed. It was really a great storyline, but yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be needed in my game because I would talk through my players in a metagaming sense about what we're doing there. But I love the thought of it, the ethos, and I think that would be great to have in game. They said it's intended to go to Speak with Dead is to this as greater restoration is to later lesser restoration. Okay, so it's a smaller way to sort of stay within the boundaries. I like it. I mean, I think it's good. Yeah, I would also like guidance isn't not guidance. What's the one that does Wheel and Woe? Augury. That's it. Augury does Wheel and Woe. That'd be interesting. Yeah, I'd love to hear other people, and I see a couple other people in the chat, and there's some people on Discord and some people on Twitter. Oh, sorry if I got a fragmented community here, but I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on it. I like it. I like, matter of fact, it's inspirational to me because I like the idea of how do you get a good necromancer, right? What's going on there, right? And how would you build things around it? And they were saying, I do allow it without consent, but it causes the magic to be less potent because the soul fights the magic. Plus, necromancy without consent is a crime in my world. Yeah, necromancy is a problem, dude. It's a player by character race, but I have sometimes I've hand waved it. I've had players in here who wanted to play a necromancer, and I hand wave it because like if I can knuckle down on players. Like if they're doing something illegal, I don't think they understand what illegal means in this world. Like they would be outcast. No one would allow them in their towns. And if you have if you're playing Lost Mansions of Phandelver, for instance, if you roll up into town with a bunch of zombies behind you and they tell you, you need to get up on out of here, what do you got? The campaign's essentially shut down, right? So that's something you want to talk about, one. But two, the other, you're saying that so they risk jail time. That's like burning down the town they just came from is an old gaming trope, right? That happens frequently. And I have seen that before where, matter of fact, the same party that did the Necromancer, they were bullies. I actually ended up ending that campaign because I was like, listen, dude, I don't like this game. I don't enjoy your play. So I think we're done. But they were just bullies. They would get in and like plot to how to kill people. And anytime an NPC didn't do what they wanted, they would bully them. And so I just let it to where it broke down in some. They were like, listen, you need to get out of here. We don't want you in the town. They said, no, we're not leaving. They get into a fight. I said, okay, well, I didn't even roll the combat. It's like you're 5th level. There's a bunch of commoners. You slaughter them all. Maybe let's roll a dice to see how many run off into the woods. Do you chase the ones down in the woods? Is that fun for you? Like I try to point out this is childish behavior. and if sometimes they don't react to that, I don't know. But this is why these pitch decks are so important, right? They create they create expectations up front to understand. Listen, if you want some kind of power fantasy, I'm not putting that play down. It's just that's not the game that I run, and I'm not going to enjoy it as a game master. And I can tell you, I recently ended a campaign because I was like, I'm dreading this campaign because it was just people were rude and they were showing up. I didn't know if they were going to show up to the game, and they were just doing the typical things. And I was like, why am I was literally debating with myself over, do I because my birthday was this week, and I remember thinking, oh, do I move my birthday plans around to accommodate the games? Like, I better, because they never show up, and if I don't push everything around all the time, then we're not going to have a game. And then I was like, why am I doing this? These people don't give a crap about my time. Why would I care about theirs? And I just ended the game because of that. And so it's important to really understand and how these rules go out. But anyway, it's a great example of why you want to have a discussion with your players. Set that tone before the game begins. So especially if somebody wants to play a necromancer, how do people see necromancers in the world? That's a great topic to have on it. So yeah. So anyway, yeah, the funny, I just reiterate, the funniest part to me about baseline safety and consent is people violate it like out of the gate, and I've never been not shocked when they do that. All right, so let's use what time I have left, about 20 minutes left. Necromancy itself isn't, Fairlyre saying, necromancy itself isn't evil or illegal. It's when the practice without consent or behalf of the soul is considered evil in my world. Yeah, that's good. I mean, if I were running the world the way I think it would react, I cannot imagine anyone being okay with a dead body being animated and moved around. I just can't imagine any human being. We have a natural humanoid. We have a natural revulsion towards that kind of thing. Even I worked at a medical school once, and even sort of the practices that they have there, when they're medically necessary and there's some benefit, it's a somber attitude. So you have to sort of abandon logic and lean into the game. But anyway. So what I want to do is create a pitch deck. I'm taking the old deck. I've changed some of the colors. You can see I've changed some of the images up, and you probably can't read all of this. That's okay. But I'm adding a different set of images to sort of evoke what we're going to be doing in this game. And this is available, by the way, on my website. If you go to Safety and Consent Tools, there's a link for this now. I'll actually create a whole blog post in the future about pitch decks and how to do them. But this is the link that I share. Everybody can download and use these. So anyway, let's talk about Tales of the Sword Mountain. So what I want to do is create an episodic game coming up. When I say episodics, I'll run one-shots, and one-shots are really a series of adventures. They run maybe 3 to 5 sessions. The single plot, go get the MacGuffin, come back and do the thing, and sort of churn it over. And I want to set it in and around the Sword Mountains. Just because it's known, it's in a typical setting, people kind of know what it is. I like homebrew worlds, but if I'm rotating groups out and things like that, I don't have time to educate people on my homebrew setting. If I get a play group that's super into that and would pay attention, I would definitely do it, but I'd have to have a regular group that was into that. So Tales of the Sword Mountain are episodic. I want to set them in and around the Sword Mountains. The idea here, so it's frontier. So the tagline I came up with is frontier adventures in the lost cities and boom towns of the Sword Mountains, right? So I should say lost ruins. I should call it not cities, but ruins. I lean in heavily in that Sword Mountain. So Phandalin, those areas around there. Those are all sort of recreate. This is what people don't realize about the Sword Coast sometimes, if they don't know the Forgotten Realms, is it's supposed to be this wild land, right? It's called the Savage Coast. That it's not. It's got no kingdoms. It's got no great cultures. It's been in this constant state of churn, and specifically around Neverwinter, which is where these games are set. Neverwinter itself was destroyed 50 years previously by a gigantic explosion. So the place had already been decimated by warfare between tribes and people living in the region. And then there was this volcano that went off and devastated the region, right? So they're reclaiming these towns. So I like this frontier opportunity and so dungeon delves and things like that. So So the tagline I came up with is Frontier Adventures in the Lost Ruins of Boomtown. So this is text from my last slide that you saw. So the setting itself is going to be the resettled, the frontier. I want to call it resettled because I don't like that idea of settlement. One of the themes of the game is these are newcomers to areas where people already have settled, so they're not going to see that kindly. The frontier regions of the Sword Mountains, as people seek to reestablish, not reestablish. Well, reestablish might work because there were towns there. To reestablish settlements and grow wealthy. So let me go down to settlements. Let me go down to sources, inspiration. So none of this is one of these. Deadwood, that's probably, Deadwood would be an inspiration. I like to give out media inspirations, and this is a harder one to get because it's episodic, but where would it go? I don't want it to be oppressive. I want it to be sort of frontier, journey-based, not really gritty even, just things like that. So Deadwood would be great. Indiana Jones. So high adventure, right? What else would be in there? So it's not like kingdom based, so Star Wars wouldn't be great. It's not political. So Deadwood, Indiana Jones, a Wheel of Time maybe would be a book series. I'm having a hard time thinking of a book series like that. But just something to give players. The Mummy would be great, like Brendan Fraser's, not The Mummy. Would be great. What else is like a great dungeon delve kind of movie? Or frontier based? Firefly, that's a great one, man. That's a, hey, Gandian, it's great to have you here. Firefly. That's a great, yeah, I love it. What else? I can't think of what else. But if you think of anything, go ahead and drop it down in the chat. I'd love to add it. But yeah, so that'll be the inspiration. So people know, oh, I'm going on journeys. I know it's very rustic. I know it's without a lot of supplies. I know that it's sort of these hard edge people living in a hard world. It implies some of the adventures, like there's frontier folks vying for resources. There's maybe some people who live in that region that are coming in. I don't want to get into colonialism. That's not what I'm looking for. But yeah. So campaign style probably still fits. Moderate to heavy role playing, moderate lore. Yeah, that still works. Heavy action adventure. Yep. Moderate combat focus. This is really more my play style, so this is probably not going to change. Heavy focus on player choices and consequences. Funny at times, but not goofy. Yeah, I think that's still good. What are my sources that I'm using? Last time I did this, Tasha's hadn't even been out. So what do I want? Tasha's. PHB, Xanathar. Just Xanathar's Guide to Everything. Guide to Everything. Tasha's. What else is coming up? Van Richten? Yeah, Van Richten. Guide to Ravenloft. Yeah, Van Richten Guide to. So races and classes. Other sources on a case-by-case basis. Based on background and fit to the setting. No UA. So that fits for my... Tash and Cauldron of Everything, TCOE. Yeah. Keep a consistent format. There's also Ravnica and Eberron. Yeah, I'm actually not using those, so those aren't fitting. So how do I look at that? There's things where like, yeah, I might use it if somebody came with that. If somebody wanted to come at me with a changeling, this is one of the reasons why it's good to have things in a pitch deck, right? Because somebody might ask that question, right? Can I use Ravnica? Can I use Eberron? Ravnica, no. I mean, it's more of a classic Greek setting or Magic the Gathering. The power level is a little off. It's just not a match for the Sword Coast and the style of game we're running one. So that lets them know that. Eberron opens up a bigger conversation because I'd ask them what they want to use from Eberron and they'd come forward with it. Hey, I want to run a changeling. I'd actually be fine with that. Then I have to get in. I actually have secret lore for changeling in my world that I would then share with them, see if they want to do. I avoid that topic because I can't stand Warforged. Yeah, so like, and I'll tell you why quickly. It comes into safety tools, but Warforged started out in third edition as the story of Warforged was the abandoned soldier narrative, right? That they were created for war during 100 years war. The war is over now, and now they're being abandoned. What do you do with them? I loved it. I loved that idea. Now they're sort of tree people. They're wood. They're not metal. So the rules are a little weird. But most of all, what I don't like about it is people just go, meet mop morp, I'm a robot. And they come in and they play Big Hero 6. It's not an anime style game. So the genre fit is off, one. And two, to be honest, I have a hard time with that. Like, I'm a veteran, so I don't really appreciate people playing, like taking that war narrative and turning it into like, I'm having fun. And that's just my own personal bugaboo, but I just can't get past it. So it annoys me. I don't want to do it, and I'm not going to do it. So, yeah, so in my game, I generally don't do that. Plus, I've never seen anybody play Warforged who is not like a weird, crazy power gamer. So, yeah, there's that. I take the source's idea a step further and actually list the racist subclasses that are allowed. That would be great. I couldn't fit that on a slide because remember, it's a slide, right? I want people to read it really quick and be able to understand, hey, is this worth talking more about? But again, if somebody came at me with a, hey, I really want to play a Minotaur from Ravnica, I'd probably be okay with that, or Luxodon, or I'd probably be okay with that. But what needs to happen there is they need to like it enough and have a solid enough idea to come back and talk to me about it, right? What is on the pitch deck for me, and what I recommend for you, is it's not a list of absolutes. It's a start. Again, like I said earlier, it's a start of the conversation. And if they want to add or ask a question or something, just give them your baseline. If they want an exception, they can ask for it. They can come forward with an idea and say, hey, what do you think about X? And you can say, oh, I never thought about that. Or in my weird bugaboo case of the Warforged, I can give the case of like, well, I just can't get around it because of this. This is a problem for me. So I'm having a hard time with it. And maybe we could just move past it, right? Move on. So anyway, that's how I run it. Again, just rule of thumb and a quick guide for how they can get around your game. They need to pitch it to you and get your buy-in. I like that. Yeah, that's exactly what that's for, right? It's not, I'm not trying to tell people, absolutely rule people and tell them you can do this, you can't do that. I'm just saying, what is my baseline? What is my norm? And if you want something different, let me know what that is. Because I couldn't possibly imagine every idea somebody else could have, right? I couldn't possibly imagine that. So they just need to sort of tell me, they need to do a little pitch to me about their character and how it fits in the world. So yeah. I actually think that covers the frontier regions of the Sword Mountains as people seek to establish settlements and grow wealthy. Yeah, so I want that resource competition theme. I want that finding lost civilization theme. I want the journeys into unknown region theme. That's what I'm really looking for. Yeah. All right. So the house rules are the same. So let's go to tools and resources. So this is a game I intend to play with different groups of people. Actually, I have no problem running different groups, but like I'll do one adventure will be like 3 to 5 sessions, and then when we move to a different adventure, we might use a whole different group of players or characters or really whatever people want, because I'm looking to get to know players in my region, right? So ideally, what I would like out of this is some mix of getting to know a few people online that I can play some online games with, and then getting to meet some more people here locally, since local events are starting to happen again, and people are getting to know one another. So we have to be tentative about that, but I'm looking for a regular gaming group, so this will help with that. So in this case, Discord, video and audio for remote groups. Bot, I use D&D Beyond to have a D&D Beyond shareable thing. I'm going to switch up. Last game I used Foundry VTT. This time I'm actually just going to use Owlbear Rodeo, and I might actually lean in heavily to Theater of the Mind. In-person session using regular old tables, dice, and paper. So yeah, all that is good. That's still applicable here. Running style and conventions. Actually, not a lot of this changes. So once you prepare a pitch deck, it's really easy to use. So PvP not encouraged. Goal to have fun. Dark moments may be juice for the hero to shine. Frequent callbacks to relationships you established. I use that all the time. So when they often when I run a campaign, although this won't be a campaign, campaigns are usually this culmination of what relationships that they build over time. And my climactic encounters at the end of a campaign is often bringing to bear all the resources they've gathered from all the relationships they've built, or having those resources used against them for the relationships they haven't built, and things like that. So that's very frequent when I run my games. Tell them again, killing someone over a disagreement, not a great thing. Active feedback, incorporate what you like. Feedback is just hard to get. I say this all the time. We always talk about feedback on YouTube or Twitter. People always just say, well, just ask your players, talk to your players, as if that solves the problem. It usually doesn't. Feedback is so difficult to get that there are whole billion-dollar marketing agencies who do nothing but get feedback, because asking someone just is they may not know the actual answer. They may not realize what they like and don't like. They may be shy about giving their answer. There's a million reasons why you can't get great feedback. Now, you should ask. You should always ask. But people aren't really great about giving you feedback. So understand that. So strive for rules and narrative consistently. I use the rules because why not? Like, if you're not using rules, just get around and just say whatever dope stuff you do and move on to the next person in line. Why bother using a rule system? Encourage use of character downtime for role-playing elements, role-playing goals, blah, blah, blah. Sessions, I probably have to change that bullet, but I have to figure out what that will be. Time of day to be DBT. I'll leave that bullet for now. Homebrew elements, I need to change this wholesale because a lot of these have changes. I'm using Tasha's rules on cantrips. And there's just like, you can change your cantrips out on a long rest, I think it is. Party unaware of death saves, different things like that. So I'll actually publish a different set of here. I'm definitely going to use the journey rules here. And I need to link here. If you go to my site and over to home, these have grown over time. House rules. My current 5e house rules. This has grown a little bit. Exhaustion, blocked by enemies. A bit, so I'm going to just have to link this for players. Small set of house rules. See full house rules on my blog. I didn't have a blog when I created this this pitch deck the first time. So let me put a link in here. Apply. And I'll change these up for later. But these are just basic homebrew elements. Table rules. There's one I had to add. It's just really, people are just, in this, lately D&D has gotten just, people are just, I think it's that hookup culture where people just don't show or ghost. And it happens to everybody, not just me. But yeah. Be on time, be prepared, be considerate. You can miss games. I mean, that's okay. But if you're like 80% of your sessions, people are late, or like, I'm done. I'm not going to like change plans with my wife to honor a game where people can't be bothered to show up. So yeah, just different things like that. Tales by the campfire, all that kind of stuff. Gandian. By the way, if you want to speed up combat, a house rule I use for criticals is that you just max damage for the dice you've rolled, and the dice plus the dice. I've done that house rule, specific house rule. I actually like it. I like it, but here's what I run into. I'd be interested to hear about your thoughts on this. The reason why I stopped using it is that works great for weapons. But once you get into like smite damage and backstab damage, it is crazy. It just, once you're maxing out that like that smite damage, plus they, if they're adding spells on top of it, searing smite on top of it and all that stuff, you can really get kind of gross with damage. You can really create tons and tons and tons of damage. And so I stopped using it for that reason. But I'd like to hear your experience with it. So I like it. Because I'm caught in this space. There's a lot of rules in D&D, like flanking. I'm caught in this space where the rule itself is too much, but not having anything is like too little. So I don't feel like there's any Goldilocks zone for these rules. Same thing is critical. So I just let them sort of go. I let them go, and I just use criticals out of the book. The other side that where this is bad is it also is used against the players, right? So if that's your house rule, then turn around and as you go up in difficulty in CRs, there's two big problems that begin to happen in D&D as you go up in level. One is that monsters do crazy high burst damage, and they have multiple attacks. Often have multiple attacks. So monsters have one more capability to crit, more opportunities to crit, and their dice, when you max out their dice against the players, that player just takes a header and goes straight down. So that's a problem to me. Because you have to think about how it's used against the players. And the other is that game design, like if you're using design modules, this has gotten worse and worse and worse as we've gotten longer in the tooth on 5e. There's this trend towards single big monsters and campaign designs that I'm not a big fan of. But you look at modules, by the time players like 5th and 6th level, they're facing off against CR 8, 9 monsters. I think Rime of the Frostmaiden, you have these 7th level characters going up against a CR 13 creature, which is bananas. If that creature critted a player, they might kill them outright on massive damage, on the massive damage rolls. So yeah, I like it because I felt the same pull myself. I felt like, man, criticals are just, they're kind of weak tea, right? It's not great, but like the edge cases are so impactful that it kind of didn't feel like it was great to do. So, yeah, I wish I had a better house rule, but I don't. But anyway, I that's a great house rule. I've used it before. All right, so table rules, and then safety and consent is going to be very much the same thing. I'll cover these in a future blog post. I have to do the part 2 of the journey rules coming up, so I will do those soon. But it is the top of the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this stream today. I hope you got something out of this. I'm going to publish these online, get a couple of give some opportunities for people who might be looking to play online with me as well, and then some local groups. So if you're local to the Richmond area, please just drop me a note on Twitter. I'd love to game with you. And if you're interested in playing online, I'll probably start these sessions at the end of July, maybe the beginning of August, and I'll do one shots. If I run into a group of people who are super interested in streaming D&D, I'd be interested I'd like to try streaming a game just to see what it's like. I don't think I'm going to do it regularly, but it might be fun to just do it, just to try to do something and have it out there once. Yeah, so if you're interested in that, just drop me a note. I hope you've gotten something out of it. So as always, I hope you'll participate in the conversation. If you're seeing this later on YouTube or on Twitch or something like that, I hope you'll drop me a comment either in YouTube itself or down on Twitter on the Tavern Wall. I hope you leave a like and subscribe. That really, really helps me out. I'm a super small streamer. So if you can share this with your friends, so link the video or my blog post or anything you think is particularly useful, I hope you'll do that. But really, I hope you'll comment something back on Twitter. Twitter's the greatest, probably the easiest place to reach me with if you have an observation or a thought or it's been useful to you. I would love to hear anything that you run across in any of my content. All right, so thank you very much for joining me this week. As always, I will be back next week with another D&D stream. As always, will I be back next week? Actually, I think I may not be streaming next week. I think I have a family thing then, but I'll work it out. But we have I hope you have some great games in the meantime. Please share, like, subscribe, all those social media things. And remember, in the meantime, fun is not optional. Thanks, everybody. You take care, and I will talk to you soon. I feel